You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Iteration is the discipline of repeating structured improvement cycles so that small, verifiable wins accumulate into durable system performance gains. The orientation emphasizes that progress in complex delivery systems rarely comes from sweeping transformations, but from repeated cycles of detect, decide, try, verify, and standardize. Each cycle produces a modest step forward, and over time, these steps compound into major improvements. Iteration is less about dramatic breakthroughs and more about cultivating habits of reflection, testing, and learning. By embedding rhythm and accountability, iteration transforms improvement from occasional initiatives into continuous practice. The goal is not perfection in a single pass, but steady progress that endures. Iteration creates resilience because the system is always learning, adapting, and reinforcing gains. Teams that embrace iteration avoid both complacency and chaos, building reliable performance by treating improvement as an ongoing journey rather than a sporadic event. The cycle model provides scaffolding for improvement by anchoring to a familiar framework: plan, do, study, act. This structure ensures that efforts focus on testable change rather than vague commitments to try harder. Planning clarifies what change will be attempted and what signals will be observed. Doing carries out the experiment. Studying evaluates evidence against expectations. Acting decides whether to adopt, adapt, or abandon the change. This simple but powerful rhythm keeps improvement grounded in evidence and decisions. For example, a team might plan to reduce meeting length, execute a 3-week trial, study decision yield per minute, and then act by institutionalizing the new format. The cycle model turns improvement into a science rather than a ritual. It ensures that every attempt leaves behind learning, regardless of outcome. By structuring improvement this way, teams create predictability and credibility in their pursuit of better flow. Cadence selection sets the pace of iteration by aligning improvement cycles with delivery rhythms. Weekly or bi-weekly windows are common, providing regular opportunities to attempt, measure, and adjust without overwhelming the team. Too frequent, and cycles create fatigue. Too infrequent, and momentum is lost. Aligning cadence to existing delivery rituals ensures that improvement feels integrated rather than bolted on. For example, a team with 2-week sprints may embed iteration reviews into sprint retrospectives, ensuring change discussions align with planning. Cadence provides predictability, signaling to stakeholders when improvements will be considered and when results will be reviewed. This rhythm builds trust and habit, turning iteration into a reliable practice. Cadence selection reminds organizations that improvement is not an occasional luxury, but a recurring responsibility, scheduled with the same seriousness as delivery itself. Target condition framing distinguishes between broad aspirations and the immediate objective of this cycle. Instead of aiming vaguely to reduce delays, a target condition defines a specific observable state, such as reduce average test queue age from 10 days to 5. This clarity ensures that each cycle is actionable and measurable. Target conditions are stepping stones, not final destinations. They represent the next achievable state, building momentum toward larger goals. For example, a team may aspire to double flow efficiency, but frame this cycle's target as improving first-pass yield in testing by 10%. Framing conditions this way prevents overwhelm and encourages focus. It also makes progress visible, as each cycle delivers tangible improvement. Target condition framing demonstrates that iteration is about progress in increments, with each cycle setting and achieving a clear next state in the journey. Current condition assessment grounds iteration in facts rather than anecdotes. Before planning a change, teams must capture baselines, distributions, and constraints. For example, if the aim is to reduce context switching, current data might show an average of 5 concurrent items per person and frequent interrupts from urgent requests. Capturing this condition ensures that improvement starts from reality, not from assumptions or selective memory. It also allows accurate comparison after the cycle, proving whether changes produced effect. Assessment protects credibility by making the system's state transparent. It also highlights constraints that shape feasible experiments, such as vendor availability or environment readiness. By documenting the current condition, teams prevent cycles from chasing imagined problems. Instead, iteration becomes a disciplined pursuit of improvements grounded in evidence, ensuring that each cycle responds to real conditions and produces verifiable learning. Hypothesis writing transforms ideas into accountable bets. A hypothesis states the proposed change, the expected signal movement, and the observation window. For example, if we cap WIP at 3 items per developer, then Q-age will decline by 20% within 4 weeks. Hypotheses prevent cycles from drifting into unstructured tinkering. They provide a benchmark against which evidence can be compared, making outcomes interpretable. Hypothesis writing also clarifies intent for stakeholders, showing why a change was attempted and what it sought to achieve. Even disproved hypotheses generate value by producing learning about what does not work. This practice reframes iteration from trial and error to structured experimentation. It builds transparency and accountability, as each change is framed as a test rather than a gamble. Hypothesis writing ensures that iteration advances knowledge systematically, one accountable bet at a time. Small batch practice emphasizes limiting scope and concurrent changes within a cycle. By making adjustments in manageable increments, teams lower the risk of unintended side effects and improve attribution. For example, changing one policy at a time allows clear interpretation of whether outcomes improved. Attempting 5 simultaneous changes obscures learning and increases complexity. Small batches protect stability, as each change can be safely rolled back if necessary. They also accelerate feedback, since smaller interventions reveal results faster. This discipline parallels the principle of delivering in small increments. Progress is made more reliable by keeping scope limited. Small batch practice ensures that iteration is precise and interpretable. It prevents thrash, where too many changes overwhelm the system and dilute learning. By focusing cycles on small, testable improvements, organizations build confidence and momentum steadily. A visible improvement backlog organizes cycle candidates with owners, success measures, and readiness criteria. Instead of ad hoc selection based on personality or urgency, the backlog ensures transparency and fairness. For example, proposed improvements might include pruning the backlog, tightening entry criteria, or stabilizing the test pipeline, each with defined success signals. The backlog allows prioritization by effort, impact, or risk, aligning selection with strategy. It also ensures continuity, as ideas not chosen for this cycle remain visible for future consideration. Ownership clarifies accountability, preventing proposals from drifting. By making improvements as trackable as delivery work, the backlog embeds iteration into normal flow. It reinforces that improvement is not optional but part of system design. A visible backlog also strengthens engagement, as all contributors can see where their ideas stand and how decisions are made. Integrated retrospectives and triggered reviews make iteration responsive to real events. Instead of waiting for the next calendar slot, notable occurrences mid-cycle, such as a major incident or a sudden spike in rework, can trigger reviews. Integrated retrospectives ensure that cycles respond flexibly, adjusting plans without breaking cadence. For example, a triggered review might reprioritize backlog items after an unexpected compliance finding. This flexibility prevents iteration from becoming rigid ritual. It also reinforces trust, as teams know improvement responds to reality rather than sticking to outdated agendas. By integrating retrospectives into delivery and allowing triggers for exceptional events, organizations strike a balance between rhythm and responsiveness. Iteration remains predictable but adaptive, strengthening its role as a living system of improvement rather than a fixed meeting on the calendar. Feedback source fusion ensures that iteration addresses the system as it is experienced, not just as it is instrumented. Metrics alone cannot reveal all wastes, nor can anecdotes capture full patterns. Fusion combines telemetry, user surveys, frontline observations, and stakeholder interviews. For example, latency metrics may indicate system slowness, but user interviews might reveal that frustration stems more from unclear error messages than from delays. By blending perspectives, iteration captures both quantitative and qualitative evidence. This fusion also prevents bias, as multiple sources validate findings. It makes improvement more holistic, addressing both technical and human dimensions of performance. Feedback source fusion ensures that cycles produce changes that resonate across the system, not just in dashboards. It strengthens credibility by demonstrating that improvement is grounded in multiple forms of evidence, not just numbers or opinions alone. Distribution-aware learning examines how iteration affects the full spread of outcomes, not just averages. For example, while average lead time may improve, long-tail delays may remain unchanged, continuing to frustrate certain users. By inspecting percentiles and tail behaviors, organizations detect whether improvements are equitable and stable. Distribution analysis also reveals unintended regressions, such as widening variability even as averages decline. This discipline ensures that cycles do not celebrate misleading progress. It builds resilience by focusing attention on predictability, not just speed. For example, reducing the 95th percentile of cycle times may matter more to customer trust than shaving a day from the average. Distribution-aware learning reinforces that iteration is about stability as well as improvement. By analyzing spreads, teams ensure that every cycle contributes to a system that is not only faster but also fairer and more reliable. Cross-team synchronization prevents cycles from colliding or duplicating when multiple groups iterate simultaneously. Shared integration points, such as joint retrospectives or meta-reviews, align cycles that span boundaries. For example, if two teams attempt changes to a shared interface, synchronization ensures that improvements complement rather than conflict. Meta-retrospectives also allow systemic learning, where patterns across teams are identified and addressed collectively. Synchronization balances autonomy with coherence. It prevents wasted energy on redundant experiments and reduces risk from misaligned changes. Cross-team alignment demonstrates that iteration is not just a local habit, but a systemic discipline. It ensures that cycles contribute to enterprise-wide improvement, where local learning flows into shared capability. This coordination preserves agility while harnessing the benefits of scale, turning multiple cycles into a unified engine of resilience. Documentation and traceability ensure that learning survives beyond the individuals or meetings where it occurs. Each cycle should record what was attempted, why, what signals were expected, what results were observed, and what decisions followed. These searchable notes create a repository of organizational knowledge. For example, a record might show that a WIP limit trial reduced queue ages by 20%, prompting adoption as standard practice. Without documentation, lessons are forgotten, and teams repeat experiments unnecessarily. Traceability also supports accountability, as stakeholders can review decisions and evidence. Documentation transforms iteration from oral tradition into durable learning. It builds institutional memory, enabling improvement to compound rather than reset with each cycle. By embedding traceability, organizations protect against drift and ensure that progress is cumulative, not dependent on fragile recollection. Governance right-sizing ensures that iteration remains fast while staying accountable. Heavyweight approvals slow cycles and discourage experimentation, while absence of oversight undermines credibility. Right-sizing replaces bureaucratic gates with lightweight evidence checkpoints. For example, rather than requiring executive sign-off for every change, a cycle may proceed if evidence is logged and traceable. This approach balances speed with assurance, demonstrating that accountability can travel with the work. Right-sizing governance reinforces that iteration is both agile and trustworthy. It reassures stakeholders that compliance, safety, and ethics remain embedded. By tailoring oversight to scale with risk, organizations preserve momentum without sacrificing integrity. Governance right-sizing strengthens the legitimacy of iteration, ensuring that improvements are not dismissed as reckless, but recognized as disciplined, evidence-backed evolution. Anti-pattern safeguards protect iteration from dysfunction. Common pitfalls include thrash, where too many changes overload the system; gold plating, where cycles chase perfection at the expense of progress; and skipping cycles, which erodes habit and credibility. By naming these risks, organizations remain vigilant. For example, if multiple changes are trialed at once, attribution becomes impossible, producing confusion instead of learning. Safeguards ensure that cycles stay small, rhythmic, and accountable. They remind teams that progress is built from steady increments, not from chasing flawless solutions or neglecting discipline. By monitoring for these anti-patterns, organizations sustain iteration as a reliable engine of improvement. Anti-pattern safeguards protect both pace and credibility, ensuring that cycles remain focused on learning and resilience rather than drifting into ceremony or chaos. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Rolling baselines keep improvement cycles fresh and relevant by adjusting targets as the system evolves. If goals remain static after early wins, complacency sets in and cycles lose momentum. For example, once average test queue age drops from 10 days to 5, the new baseline should become 5, with the next cycle aiming to push it closer to 3. Rolling baselines prevent teams from declaring premature victory or drifting into maintenance-only mode. They also ensure that cycles remain ambitious but realistic, matching current performance rather than outdated conditions. This practice builds a sense of progress, as each cycle ratchets performance upward from the most recent state. Rolling baselines make iteration continuous rather than episodic, reminding teams that improvement is never complete, but always advancing. They provide the scaffolding that transforms individual wins into an enduring trajectory of systemic growth. Seasonality-aware planning acknowledges that improvement cycles must adapt to external rhythms, not operate in a vacuum. Systems behave differently during peak demand, regulatory deadlines, or downtime periods, and cycle expectations must reflect this. For example, attempting major pipeline changes during a holiday retail surge risks instability, while quieter periods may offer better windows for deeper experiments. Seasonality also shapes signal latency. Adoption metrics may take longer to shift during slow months, requiring extended observation windows. By planning cycles around predictable patterns, organizations align ambition to reality. This prevents wasted energy on experiments that cannot be fairly measured under unusual conditions. Seasonality-aware planning demonstrates maturity, recognizing that context matters as much as method. It ensures that iteration remains credible, responsive, and aligned with organizational rhythms, producing improvements that hold under real-world operating conditions. Guardrails provide safety nets for cycles, ensuring that experiments can halt or reverse when signals move adversely. These include stop-loss criteria, escalation thresholds, and rollback steps defined before changes begin. For example, if a WIP limit causes critical priorities to stall, rollback criteria allow the cap to be relaxed quickly. Stop-loss thresholds prevent harm from spreading, such as halting an automation rollout if error rates exceed tolerance. Guardrails create confidence, encouraging experimentation by containing risk. They demonstrate that iteration is disciplined, not reckless. By planning exit strategies up front, organizations prevent cycles from becoming entrenched in failing experiments. Guardrails make iteration safer, faster, and more sustainable by embedding reversibility. They reinforce the principle that learning is valuable even when an experiment is halted, as long as it is done responsibly and transparently. Scaling Path describes how iteration grows from a single team's habit into a program-wide capability. Expansion requires standardizing templates, rhythms, and evidence capture while allowing flexibility for local tailoring. For example, one team's improvement backlog template can be adopted across a program, creating comparability without dictating identical methods. Scaling also involves shared rhythms. such as synchronized retrospectives, so cycles align across boundaries. However, scaling must avoid the trap of one-size-fits-all. Teams need room to adapt practices to their unique context, provided they report results in comparable ways. By scaling responsibly, organizations amplify local wins into systemic capability. The scaling path demonstrates that iteration is not just a team discipline but an enterprise one, where learning and improvement are shared assets. This growth multiplies impact, embedding continuous improvement into the organization's cultural DNA. Autonomy with convergence balances local flexibility with systemic alignment. Teams retain freedom to tailor cycle methods to their context but must align on shared metrics, documentation, and decision logs. For example, one team may run weekly retrospectives while another prefers bi-weekly, but both record their hypotheses, baselines, and outcomes in a central repository. This autonomy preserves energy and ownership, while convergence ensures that results can be synthesized across teams. Without convergence, iteration becomes fragmented. Without autonomy, it becomes bureaucratic. Balancing both ensures that improvement remains meaningful locally and coherent systemically. This practice respects the diversity of contexts while still building comparability for leadership and peers. Autonomy with convergence turns iteration into a federated discipline, empowering teams while enabling enterprise-level learning and coordination. It demonstrates that unity and diversity can coexist productively within a system of continuous improvement. Learning propagation ensures that proven changes extend beyond the team that discovered them. Communities of practice, golden paths, and shared playbooks are vehicles for this propagation. For example, if one team validates that pruning oversized backlog items improves flow, that insight should be published in a shared improvement library and incorporated into organizational training. Propagation prevents rediscovery, accelerates adoption, and amplifies value. It also builds morale, as teams see their experiments influencing broader outcomes. By institutionalizing mechanisms for sharing, organizations compound learning across cycles. Propagation transforms iteration from isolated experiments into collective progress. It ensures that each cycle not only improves local conditions, but also strengthens organizational capability. This practice turns improvement into an asset that multiplies rather than remains confined. It ensures that gains scale sustainably across the enterprise. Experiment design maturation improves the sophistication of cycles over time without overcomplicating them. Early iterations may focus on simple one-variable tests, while mature organizations adopt factorial or sequential testing to extract more insight per cycle. For example, a team might test both meeting hygiene and backlog pruning in structured combinations, isolating which factor drives change. Sequential tests allow cycles to build on one another, refining hypotheses progressively. Maturation increases efficiency, generating richer learning with fewer cycles. However, it must remain pragmatic. Overcomplication risks slowing momentum. Experiment design maturation reflects growth in organizational capability, where iteration evolves from basic adjustments to disciplined inquiry. This progression demonstrates that continuous improvement itself can improve, producing greater insight and resilience with each turn of the cycle. It turns iteration into a learning laboratory as much as a delivery discipline. Pivot persevere decisions are made mid-cycle when signals indicate that an adjustment is necessary. If progress is strong, teams may persevere and scale. If signals are weak, a pivot may be needed, such as splitting scope, shifting methods, or consolidating with another experiment. For example, if WIP limits reduce average delays but create outliers, the pivot may involve tighter controls on specific stages. Pivot persevere thinking prevents cycles from being rigid. It keeps iteration dynamic, adjusting course without losing rhythm. By treating changes as hypotheses, teams normalize adaptation rather than seeing it as failure. Pivot persevere decisions demonstrate that iteration is not about being right at the outset, but about responding responsibly to evidence. This practice strengthens resilience, ensuring that cycles maintain momentum toward target conditions even when initial approaches falter. Capacity allocation protects iteration from being displaced permanently by urgent delivery demands. Without dedicated time and resources, improvement cycles often become the first casualty of pressure. By reserving capacity, whether hours per sprint, environments for testing, or roles for stewardship, organizations protect the rhythm of iteration. For example, a team might reserve 10% of sprint capacity for improvement experiments. This allocation signals that improvement is a standing priority, not a discretionary luxury. It also builds predictability, ensuring that cycles continue even under stress. By embedding allocation, organizations demonstrate that improvement is as essential as delivery. This practice creates the consistency needed for iteration to compound gains. It also protects morale, as teams see leadership's commitment to sustainable progress. Capacity allocation ensures that iteration remains durable across fluctuating pressures. Onboarding for iteration ensures that new members strengthen rather than dilute the habit. Templates, thresholds, and expected behaviors are taught as part of orientation, making improvement a visible norm from the outset. For example, new engineers may be trained in how to frame hypotheses, log experiments, and interpret signals. Onboarding prevents drift by ensuring that cycles are not reliant on a few experienced practitioners. It also accelerates cultural assimilation, signaling that improvement is as central to work as delivery. By embedding iteration into training, organizations preserve continuity through turnover. Onboarding transforms iteration from fragile habit into durable culture. It ensures that improvement remains a shared discipline, reinforced with each new participant. This practice closes the loop between culture and practice, ensuring iteration is renewed constantly as new voices join. Vendor and partner participation aligns external contributors with iteration cycles, ensuring boundary improvements succeed. External dependencies often shape flow, so their involvement is essential. For example, if vendor testing delays block releases, cycles must include shared dashboards, escalation rules, and improvement experiments coordinated across boundaries. Partner participation ensures that changes at interfaces are tested, validated, and embedded with accountability. It also reduces friction as vendors align their rhythms with internal cadences. This practice recognizes that systems extend beyond organizational walls, and iteration must cross those boundaries. Vendor participation turns external relationships into collaborative partners in improvement. It ensures that cycles address systemic waste and risk, not just internal symptoms. This alignment strengthens resilience by embedding learning loops across the entire ecosystem. Compliance-integrated iteration replaces end-of-quarter audit scrambles with routine evidence capture. Each cycle should include approvals, documentation, and retention artifacts appropriate to its scope. For example, when a policy is simplified, the cycle log records the rationale, decision, and evidence of compliance review. By embedding compliance in cycles, organizations maintain accountability without disrupting flow. Compliance integration demonstrates that speed and transparency can coexist. It reassures regulators and stakeholders that iteration is disciplined, not reckless. It also reduces rework by capturing evidence continuously. This practice transforms compliance from a barrier into a byproduct of good iteration. It ensures that improvement is defensible under scrutiny while remaining agile. Compliance-integrated iteration makes governance a natural part of continuous improvement, strengthening trust alongside performance. Backslide detection monitors whether standardized improvements hold over time. Gains can erode silently if old habits return or conditions shift. For example, meeting hygiene improvements may slip if agendas are not enforced consistently. By monitoring for regression, organizations catch drift early and trigger refresher cycles before it becomes systemic. Detection relies on the same metrics used for improvement, now repurposed as safeguards. It ensures that progress is not only achieved but sustained. Backslide detection also reinforces accountability, signaling that improvements must endure, not just pass initial validation. This practice demonstrates humility, acknowledging that change is fragile and requires reinforcement. By embedding backslide detection, organizations protect the compounding effect of iteration, ensuring that gains accumulate rather than evaporate. Sustainability practices ensure that iteration remains effective over long horizons. Facilitators and owners are rotated to prevent fatigue, load is monitored to avoid burnout, and low-yield activities are pruned regularly. For example, if a template proves too heavy, it may be simplified to preserve energy. Sustainability acknowledges that iteration is a marathon, not a sprint. By pacing cycles and refreshing practices, organizations prevent decay into ritual without impact. Sustainability practices also signal care for participants, strengthening morale and engagement. They demonstrate that improvement is designed to be humane as well as effective. By ensuring sustainability, organizations preserve iteration as a long-term discipline. This resilience protects against both exhaustion and stagnation, ensuring that iteration continues to deliver value for years rather than months. Iteration synthesis highlights that continuous improvement thrives on rhythm, clarity, and humility. Clear target conditions, focus attention, small steps make change safe, and verifiable signals provide accountability. Cadence keeps momentum alive, while guardrails and pivots ensure resilience. Scaling, propagation, and onboarding turn local wins into organizational habit, while compliance integration and vendor alignment extend iteration across boundaries. Backslide detection and sustainability practices preserve progress over time. Together, these elements create a system where repeated cycles reliably convert observation into lasting improvement. Iteration becomes more than a method. It becomes a cultural reflex, ensuring that systems adapt, learn, and strengthen continuously. The result is a delivery environment that grows more predictable, resilient, and effective with each turn of the cycle. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.